A beautiful morning and welcome to the midweek edition of Newspaper Headlines, reaching you on the Advent Cable Network Nigeria Television. So many interesting stories making the rounds within and outside the country this beautiful Wednesday morning from select national dailies. Remember, you can join the program through phone call on our social media platforms. On YouTube is youtube.com/ACNN TV. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/ACNN TV. On Instagram and Twitter at ACNN TV. And our website is www.acnntv.com. I am Rachel Ibun. We begin with the Vanguard newspaper, and I'll take it from the lead story. I was in same kidnapper's den with my daughter, coming from the father of Jangebe kidnapped schoolgirl. And the kickers says, I told my daughter not to recognize me. They exposed us, our children, to cold for 14 weeks, says Raliat, another victim. As Zamfara government secures release of 10 abducted victims, says no ransom paid, issues 2 months ultimatum to bandits to lay down arms. And the picture is that of released Zamfara kidnapped victims, some of the 10 persons that Zamfara State Governor Bello Matawali secured their release in the early hours of yesterday after they were kidnapped by bandits 14 weeks ago in Gwaram community, Tamafara local government area of the state. And below the lead story, carry to reps. NNPC has powers to deduct running cost from source. NNPC has powers to deduct running cost from source. The story is on page 35. And below the picture, CBN invests 85.9 billion naira in health sector. The kickers disburses 253.5 million naira to COVID-19 vaccine researchers. Car COVID donates incinerator, 260 oxygen cylinders to Lagos State government. The details on page 35. 10. Fulani Group, OPC in verbal war over arrest of kidnapped kingpin Wakili. That's on page 10. And now above the masthead, affair for Vanguard. Food blockade. Neither side is the loser. The details on page 30. And on page 8, withdraw your approval of hijab wearing in Christian schools. Khan tells Governor Abdulrazak. And on page 6, 4 family members die in Bidda fire. May their souls rest in peace. PIB. South governors insist on 10% stake for oil communities. The kickers. Monarchs. Agitators behind governors. South governors have no right to issue directives to Buhari, coming from Babio. And the story is on page 12. And now to the last story on page 19. Manufacturing investment in Nigeria down to 70%. Page 17. Moving on to this day newspaper, take it above the masthead. CBN disburses 253.54 million naira grant for COVID-19 vaccine research. The kickers evaluate 68 proposals, approves 5 on merit. Mustafa Mamora Hill Emefiele. The story starts from the front page and continues on page 9. On page 8, domestic investors maintain dominance of stock market transactions. Below the masthead, Buhari launches $3.2 billion Port Harcourt Maiduguri Railway project. That story is on page 8. And to the list story newspaper, 26 states await COVID-19 vaccine delivery as 8 governors receive jab today. Lagos, Federal Capital Territory, Nasarawa, Kaduna, 7 others confirm receipts. The story starts from the front page and continues on page 9. Delta tackles federal government over £4.2 million repatriated funds from UK. Malami's insistence, despite Bielsa precedents, unacceptable, says group. Story starts from the front page and continues on page 9. We have this picture tagged East by Rail. The picture of Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning and Minister of State for Transportation during the virtual groundbreaking ceremony for the rehabilitation and construction of Port Harcourt's Maiduguri Eastern Narrow Gauge Railway in Abuja. This happened yesterday. And now to the last story on this day newspaper. PDP urges Buhari to hire mercenaries to fight insurgency. See details on page 5. We move on to New Telegraph newspaper. I'll take it from the lead story. Manufacturers spend 81.9 billion naira on alternate power sources. Seek cut in electricity tariff, fuel price. The kicker: unsold goods value hits 577.6 billion naira in 2020. The details on page 3. And the picture is that of 5 Versin researchers as they get CBN's 245.4 million naira grant. See details on page 5. Below the picture, governors to Buhari withhold NNDC funds for new board. South-South demands 10% for host communities in PIB. The details on page 4. And on page 26, type 2 diabetes can increase risks of Parkinson's disease. That is on page 26. Now above the lead story, federal government, UK signs memorandum of understanding on £4.2 million Ibori loot. The kicker coming from Malami. While data won't benefit. See story on page 3. And on page 4, Buhari, Port Harcourt Maiduguri Rail project will boost economy and create jobs. On page 27, COVID-19, Lagos, Benue, Ondo, others receive vaccines. And on page 6, coming from the presidency, PDP will return to power in 2023. This is coming from Okowa and Wike. Now above the masthead, NNPC falls Auditor General over unremitted 4.076 trillion naira. The kicker, carry to reps. We have power to make deductions from source. Story starts from the front page and continues on page 5. And now to the last story on New Telegraph newspaper. Car COVID donates 260 oxygen cylinders to Lagos. See details on page 29. Moving on to Nigerian Tribune newspaper above the masthead. How Oyo, Osun, Ondo, Ekiti crisis will affect PDP's 2023 elections. The details on page 17. And on page 5, Lagos, Nasarawa, other states get COVID-19 vaccines. Why I told my daughter when we met in kidnapper's den. What I told my daughter when we met in kidnapper's den. Father of abducted Zamfara schoolgirl. Details on page 8. Now below the masthead on page 6. Nigeria's trade deficit worsened to 1.731 trillion naira in fourth quarter of 2020. PIB. South-South governors demand 10% for oil host communities. The details on page 4. And on page 7, CBN grants 253.54 million naira to 5 health research projects. We move now to the lead story on Nigerian Tribune. Why 4.2 million pounds Ibori loot isn't for Delta, coming from AGF. And now to the kickers. Federal government plans to use fund for second Niger bridge completion. Abuja, Kano, Lagos Ibadan Expressway. I cannot speak for EFCC, CCB on suit against Tinubu, he says. And now beside the picture, Kyari insists NNPC can deduct running cost from source. The kicker, fuel subsidy gulped 4 trillion naira in 2016. Implied subsidy still exists. This is coming from NNPC, and the story is on page 6. Now page 7. Buhari flags off construction of Port Harcourt Maiduguri rail work. Alleged 2.1 billion naira fraud. Court summons Malami, Falano, Magu to testify in minors case. The details on page 28. And the picture is that of Ogun State Governor Prince Dapo Abiodun and a former governor of the state, Chief Olusegun, COVID-19 vaccine by the Commissioner for Health, Dr. Tommy Coker. The bottom strip stories: Khan tackles Kwara governor on hijab for Christian mission schools. The details on page 28. And still on that same page, parliamentary staff protest at National Assembly want financial autonomy for legislature. As on page 28. To the last story now on Nigerian Tribune on page 2, coming from Wakili. Police grant OPC members bail. The kicker, Gani Adams thanks Fenifere, Yoruba leaders, orders. Gani Adams thanks Fenifere, Yoruba leaders, orders. We move to Blueprint newspaper. I'll take it beside the masthead. Naira for dollar policy may breed round tripping, coming from Rewan. And the story is on page 22. On page 20, Federal Capital Territory Police reunite 15 trafficked children with parents. Below the masthead, ICT pulled Nigeria out of recession. This is coming from Pantami. And the kicker says, Loud's blueprint on objectivity says, I'm an avid reader. The story starts from the front page and continues on page 6. On page 5, opposition parties, others merger against APC. The lead story now, shoot on sight order may begin in Zamfara as Maitawali hints on 6,000 troop deployment. The kickers, gives government 2-month grace to surrender. Terrorists plotting kidnap of Southwest school children This is coming from Yoruba Group. Toddler, 5 others abducted in Taraba. Yoruba of decisive action. The details on page 6. And the picture is that of Minister of Communication and Digital Economy, Dr. Isa Ali Ibrahim Pantami, writes, receiving a letter of an award as the Blueprint Public Officer of the Year 2020 from leader of the Blueprint newspaper delegation during the visit to the minister in Abuja. This happened on Tuesday. Now to the last story on page 6. NNPC counters AUGF, explains 4.7 trillion naira expenses. Auditor General kicks. The story on page 6. All right, we pause here to observe a short break. When we return, we shall look at stories from other national dailies. Please stay tuned.
Every person who is charged with a criminal offense is entitled to defend himself in person or by a legal practitioner of his own choice.
Remember that an individual is entitled to remain silent.
Every citizen in Nigeria is entitled to maintain a private life.
A military checkpoint or a police checkpoint without knowing that is against or it offends them and subject you to a frog jump. That is wrong.
Thank you for staying tuned. Remember, you can call in to make your contributions on the major stories and also follow, like and share our social media platforms. On YouTube is youtube.com/ACNN TV. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/ACNN TV. On Instagram and Twitter at ACNN TV. And our website is www.acnntv.com. We continue with the leadership newspaper. I'll take it below the masthead. Nigerians ignore CBN warning as Bitcoin trading crosses $50,000 mark. The story starts from the front page. It continues on page 4. On page 20, Benin Republic understudies Nigeria's rise revolution. Federal government owing NNPC 239 billion naira. Kyari tells Senate. See details on page 5. On page 9, COVID-19. We are still compiling list of vaccination centers coming from the Federal Capital Territory Authority, and the story is on page 9. And now to the lead story. In renewed onslaught on bandits, 6,000 soldiers storm Zamfara. The kickers, Matawali gives criminals 2 months to surrender. They tricked us to get money for weapons, coming from Bellu. And the story is on page 4. And now to the picture is that of the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock of Benin Republic. His industry and trade, finance and economy counterpart and President, Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria, during a roundtable discussion between the delegates from the Republic of Benin and the association in Abuja. This happened yesterday. Now to the last story on leadership newspaper. UK to return Ibori's £4.2 million. Nigeria. Story starts from the front page and continues on page 4. Now we move to Nigerian Pilot newspaper. I'll take it below the masthead. PIB Southwest governors demand 10% for host community. The story is on page 7. And on page 13, UK to return £4.2 million recovered from Ibori in 2 weeks. The lead story, Tinubu's file. The kickers, Bola Tinubu's case file disappears from asset declaration vault. Heads to roll at Code of Conduct Bureau as federal government initiates probe. Matter terribly embarrassing, cause of worry at the Bureau. This is coming from an official. It's unbelievable and laughable. This one is coming from an analyst, and the story is on page 8. Now to the picture is that of Bayelsa State Governor Senator Dioduri, Branch Controller, Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Francis, during a courtesy visit by the bank's team to Government House in Yunugwa. Now the bottom strip stories. Nigeria may shut down as NLC embarks on nationwide protest today. The story is on page 9. On page 12, Khan cautions Kwara governor on hijab approval in Christian schools. 12 teenagers drowned after defiling COVID-19 restrictions. See details on page 6. On page 29, PH, that's Port Harcourt Maiduguri Rail, will activate economic activities in Eastern Corridor. This is coming from the President Buhari. CBN clears the air. CBN clears the air on Bayelsa's 3 billion naira agric loan. The details on page 8. And on page 9, Gumi replies Army, says bad things happened between 2010 and 2015. Still on that page 9, which happens to be the last story on Nigerian Tribune, Senate gives NNPC 1 week to explain 4.076 trillion naira unremitted funds. That is it on Nigerian Pilot newspaper. We move now to Business Day newspaper, and I'll take it from the lead story. Nigeria records first trade deficit in 4 years as COVID-19 hurts exports. The story starts from the front page. It continues on page 20. And beside that story, Nigeria stocks at new lows to fuel by interest. The story starts from the front page. It also continues on page 30. An inside story on page 2. Flutterwave closes $170 million funding to empower small businesses. Flutterwave closes $170 million funding to empower small businesses. That's on page 2. And to the last story on page 31. Bitcoin supporters overlook turmoil to tip bright future for crypto. That wraps it on Business Day newspaper. Now we move to sports on Vanguard on page 36 and the back page. We start with that on page 36. Africa Under-17 Cup of Nations. Nigeria, South Africa, Uganda and Tanzania hits by Under-17 AFCON cancellation. Aruna trudges on at World Table Tennis Stars contender. Aruna trudges on at World Table Tennis Star contender. Then we have this, the full list of Super Eagles. Get the Vanguard Sports newspaper on page 36 to know who and who are involved. Tokyo Olympics to go ahead without foreign fans. coming from the LOC. Low to quit as Germany boss. And Rivaldo, it's impossible for Barca to score 4 goals at PSG. Adesanya hits with 6-month suspension after Blakovic defeat. Needs an X-ray of his left foot and his ankle. Messi to give answer on Barca future at end of season. And the last story on this page, page 30 of Vanguard Sport. African Nations Volleyball Championship. Nigeria retain balls title. Qualify for World Championship. The African Nations Volleyball Championship. Nigeria retain boys title. Qualify for World Championship. And now to the story at the back. Squirrels, crocodile ties, Ra list 1 home-based, puts red-hot Onuachu on standby. See the story, an inside story. And we go to the features for today on Champions League. Liverpool versus RB Leipzig, 9 p.m. PSG versus Barcelona, that comes up 9 p.m. too. EPL, Man City versus Southampton, 7 p.m. And on La Liga, Atletico Madrid versus Atletico Bilbao, that comes up 7 p.m. And Bundesliga, Armenia versus West Brenham, coming up 6:30 p.m. Also check for the fixtures on Ligue 1, UEFA Women Champions League on the Vanguard Sports. That is the much we can take on today's edition of Newspaper Headlines. Many thanks for watching. Do join us for a fresh edition on Friday. I leave you with this. Though we are incomplete, God loves us completely. Though we are imperfect, He loves us perfectly. Though we may feel lost and without compass, God's love encompasses us completely. The good news is, He loves every one of us, even those who are flawed, rejected, awkward, sorrowful, or broken. God bless you, and bye for now.
Every person who is charged with a criminal offense is entitled to defend himself in person or by a legal practitioner of his own choice.
Remember that an individual is entitled to remain silent.
Every citizen in Nigeria is entitled to maintain a private life.
You are approaching a military checkpoint or a police checkpoint without knowing that it's against or it offends them and subject you to a frog jump. That is.
Beaming from the nation's capital, we bring to you the good news through various programming, news updates, worship and teachings.
The paralysis of sin makes us to be separated from God.
Contact us for your live streaming solutions and event coverage such as synods, conferences, seminars, revivals and lots more. Engage us in showcasing your brands and services to the world through adverts and sponsorship. We also offer latest broadcast equipment for rent, all at affordable prices. Tune in to ACNN TV via any free-to-air decoder with the following installation parameters: Intelsat 20 satellite with tuning frequency